Hi, Year 5. I'm going to read the book. I'm just trying to find the beginning of it for you. So I'm going to read POG to you, and it's on Purple Mash, so you should have read it yourself already by now. So if you haven't, pause the video and read it yourself first, and then you can listen to me reading it, and then I'd like you to read it out loud yourself, thinking about expression and what each chapter means. And then finally, when you've read it again yourself, you will do the questions which are at the end, which I will read out in a moment. Okay, so the prologue. So we've learned what an epilogue is, the bit at the end of the book. A prologue, so you've got pro, goes at the beginning of the book, and it's sometimes like an introduction or a mini story, maybe something that happens in the past and then we are talking about the present. So like the epilogue, it might be a different time period, or it might just be something that kind of introduces some of the characters in some way. And this has got a prologue. It was night when POG heard weeping in the forest. He'd been patrolling for an hour, and the only sounds had been the occasional cries of foxes or the low hooting of owls. POG sniffed the air. There was a scent. Human scent. POG followed the smell. He skipped over tree roots, his eyes finely attuned to the night, his furry ears twitching as he got closer to the sound. It was coming from the trees, encircling the dark, forbidden heart of the forest. POG's hackles immediately stood on end. He paced back and forth fretfully, listening to the weeping before plunging into the undergrowth. POG peeked out from behind a bush and into the circular clearing which was dotted with stunted tree trunks. There was a human child sitting on one of the old stumps, a girl with dark curly hair. She was sobbing inconsolably into her hands. POG recognised her instantly and nodded in understanding. He'd already seen her with the tall ones that very morning. They'd arrived at the house in their metal box on wheels. This was something entirely new for POG. He was used to protecting and patrolling, not coming across children of tall ones, crying in the forest. He didn't know what to do. He didn't want to reveal himself, but the girl was clearly lost. What to do? What to do? He thought, chewing on his thumb. The decision was made for him as he saw the girl suddenly look up towards the ancient twisted tree that lay in the centre of the clearing. It was as if she'd heard something. She stood up, frowning curiously at the tree, and then started walking carefully towards it. Psst! No! POG hissed, drawing his sword and staff without thinking. The girl wheeled round. Who's that? Who's there? POG hid behind the bush, his chest tight, muscles tense. A friend, he said. Is you lost? The girl wiped her eyes and nodded. Yes, she whimpered. Come then, said POG. Oh, and POG will show you the way home. The girl hunched her shoulders and didn't move. Behind her, a sliver of moonlight shone on the tree, and the black bark rippled for a moment, as if a serpent was twisting beneath it. POG smelled something fetid and rotten. He licked his lips. He needed to get the girl away from the tree, but he couldn't reveal himself. It was forbidden. Come now, he said, trying to keep his tone light and friendly. The girl clutched her hands to her chest and retreated a couple of steps closer to the tree. POG saw that the supple, insidious movement again beneath the skin of the tree, and he fancied he heard a hissing whisper. The girl was frightened, and hiding from her was only making things worse. There was only one thing for it. POG stepped into the clearing. The girl blinked in disbelief. Who are you? She asked, her lower lip trembling. POG Lumpkin, a friend. POG smiled at the girl to show her he meant no harm. The warmth he felt when she smiled in response, was a surprise to him. You're all furry, she said the girl. POG is the first of the first folk. We's all furry. Not like you tall folk. He beckoned the girl forward, smiling at her while keeping one eye on the tree. Pog will show you the way home. Come follow Pog. Ooh, have I pasted it in funny here? I think I have. I might have to check that. I'm going to skip forward to the next page because there's something here that doesn't make sense. So I might have to change that for you, but by the time you get it, it'll be ready. And then suddenly we're on chapter 1. 30 years later. Your mum's in Ipswich. Penny looked up from unpacking a box of books. So we need to remember that. It says 30 years later. That's quite important. That's why the first bit was a prologue. Penny looked up from unpacking a box of books to see her dad wagging his phone at her. Was the girl called Penny before? No, because this is a girl now. So it can't be. Did the girl say her name before? Ipswich, he said again, and he shook his head and gave a sheepish smile. Penny felt her cheeks get hot and looked across the hallway towards her dad, towards David, who was unpacking another box only a metre or so away from her. She wanted him to look up at her so she could have someone to share her irritation with. But Dad's head was bent low. It was obvious he didn't want to have anything to do with the situation. Penny turned back towards her dad. He seemed to be waiting for her to say something. She rubbed her forehead vigorously and just said, "Right." Her dad smiled apologetically. Penny hated that smile. "Bit of confusion about directions," he shrugged. "She should be here after lunch." Penny cleared her throat. She didn't know what he expected her to say. He grinned and wagged his phone again and put it in his pocket. Penny fought the urge to roll her eyes. Instead, she remembered herself and did what she'd been doing for the past 3 months. She flashed one of her best, brilliant smiles. "That's good, Dad," she said. Her dad seemed encouraged by this, and for a moment he seemed to stand that little bit taller, like a child who'd just been complimented by a parent. Penny felt a pang of guilt for feeling so irritated in the first place. After all, he was only trying his best. They were all trying their best. "Did you hear that, David? Mum will be here after lunch." David said nothing and just kept unpacking. Penny looked at the boxes that were scattered around the hall, their whole lives squeezed in them, waiting to be unpacked in their new home. For a moment, Penny wondered if they could just leave the boxes as they were and not unpack anything. That way, they could just stay as they were, not moving forward, not moving back, stuck in time where things might be safer. Stuck between the awful past and an equally awful future. "Maybe you could both go outside and explore for a bit," said Dad. "Whatever," David said, shrugging his shoulders. Sometimes Penny wondered if he was the one who'd just become a teenager and not her. When Penny looked into his eyes, he seemed to be the oldest-looking 11-year-old in the world. "Look at it, the state of it. I wouldn't let a dog live in it," David growled. Okay, so then we have some questions. And I think you should read it again yourself before answering the questions. And if you're interested in buying the book or borrowing it for free online, then click on the links that Mrs. Gotches has given you. And I think I have attached them to this as well. Okay.